welcome. This is the first of hopefully many of guest speaker lecturers. We got some really exciting folks in here today. WRBL is in the house. We've got Mr. Joe McGuire over there, who is the general manager. And we also have Mr. Chuck Williams here, who's going to actually be your speaker today. And we want to do this just to give you all the opportunity as a department to hear from industry professionals, local partners, but people who are doing what we hope you want to do one day, and they can provide some additional insight into what their life is and what they do. And speaking of, Chuck has an amazing amount of experience, and he's worked on both sides. He's done the newspaper, and he did that for about 30 years, right?
30 years.
Then he came over to the dark side, which is my passion, which is broadcast media. And so he is now doing broadcast media. And as I understand it, you got the anchor this last weekend.
Yeah, somebody's rolling over in their grave right now because I am not the traditional TV guy. I will tell you this, and Chris, thank you for the introduction. But I will tell you this, and then I'll get into who I am in a little bit more. But I spent 36 years of my career on the print side, and I was one of those guys, those print elitists. I did sports, and as you're about to hear, and news. But I used to call them TV bobos. I used to look down my nose, even though some of my best friends were TV guys. I will say this, and I'm on camera, so somebody's going to use it eventually. And I'm probably going to get kicked out of the print guild for life. But the TV side's harder. It's much harder. The deadlines are more absolute. You know, I could always get 5-10 extra minutes on deadline if I was pounding out a story at the newspaper. At 5:55 p.m., you don't get 5 extra minutes on the TV side. That show's going on air at 6 o'clock, and Phil and Teresa are going to be on that desk. Jeswald's going to start with the weather, and it's over. I mean, so the deadlines are more absolute, and the pressure to produce on a daily basis is greater. There, I said it. I'm glad it's on the record. Let me introduce myself. I'm Chuck Williams. And 40 years ago this month, I was y'all, most of y'all. I was a senior at Troy State University. I was sitting in classes. I was about to graduate, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew I was going to be a journalist. I wanted to be a sports writer, but I wasn't sure what it held. I mean, I wasn't sure where I was going. I was just a kid from Eufaula who unfortunately had gotten out of school quicker than I should have. Stay in school as long as you can, please. That's the smartest advice, the best advice I can give you. But I was sitting there, and for the last 40 years, it has been an amazing journey, and it's all because of the profession I chose. I'm a journalist. A journalist by trade tells stories. They uncover facts. Sometimes people don't want those stories told. I've been very fortunate to be able to do this for a long, long time, and I love doing it. If my passion for what I do doesn't come out, I'm not doing it right, because I love it. Ernie Johnson said in a speech he gave to the Alabama football team, there get to jobs and there got to jobs. I know every day I walk into that station, I have a get-to job. I get to do it. I don't got to do it. I get to do it. And it's a privilege. It's a privilege to tell stories, and it's a privilege to do what I'm doing. I do a lot of courts reporting, but in the last 2.5 years, because of what's happened in the great state of Georgia, I have found myself doing a lot of political stuff locally, covering mayor's races, but a lot of state stuff too, governors, senators. And I have found politics to be the most interesting thing I've ever covered, and I'll tell you why. I spent the first 15 years of my career as a sports writer, sports editor, sports columnist, had incredible opportunities. I covered a World Series. I covered a Masters. I got to cover college football bowl games that determine championships. This was long before we had a championship. I got to cover Auburn, Alabama, Georgia. I got to go to Grant Field. I got to go to Sanford Stadium. I got to go to Jordan-Hare. I got to go to Bryant-Denny. And I got to experience that. I got to interview people like Jack Nicklaus. I got to interview people like John Smoltz. But I also got to interview people like Chico Lynch, a local high school football coach, Wallace Davis, a legend at Carver. I got to interview them and know them. And so I got to report on a broader state and national level, but I also got to report on a local level. And and I got to ask stupid questions. I'll never forget, if many of y'all probably, y'all may remember a little bit, some of the older crowd over there, but in the 1980s, the mid-1980s, NASCAR was booming, and I was working at the Anniston Star, and I was covering NASCAR. Bill Elliott was driving a Ford that looked like a red jelly bean at 216 miles an hour around the racetrack at Talladega. They have since restricted them. They don't go near as fast. We were watching something and writing about something that was truly historic. And I'll never forget, his crew chief was Ernie Elliott, his brother. Bill is better known now as Chase Elliott's dad. But I walked up to Ernie Elliott, and I was just, cocky reporter. And we're in the garage. He's standing right there by the car, with their hauler right there. I said, "Hey, Ernie, have you got a couple of seconds so we can talk?" He said, "Sure." He counts 1, 2, turned around and walked away. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I was like, questions matter. The question you ask somebody matters. I learned it very quickly that day. So the training I got as a sports guy has been the preparation for the last 20 plus years of covering politics. And I've got, everybody should have a handout right here. Okay, there's two definitions. They're as defined by Mr. Webster. First definition is for politics: the art or science of government. The art or science concerned with guiding or influencing governmental policy. The art or science concerned with winning and holding control over a government. Now go to the second one. It's game. And I just want to concentrate on the first definition: a physical or mental competition conducted according to the rules with the participants in direct opposition to each other. They just define politics. Politics is a game. It is a high stakes, big money, charisma game. What you're watching right now play out across the country politically, but we are at the epicenter of it right here in Georgia. It is a game. The game is to get your vote. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get your vote. They're playing a game. You're the scorer. You're the person that's scoring it for them. And as I have gotten into this over the last few years, I look at myself as a Columbus, Georgia, Chattahoochee Valley reporter. And I covered our mayor's race extensively this year. I cover local races a lot. But it became very apparent to me in the last, I will say since probably the summer of 2020. So as we were gearing into the 2020 cycle, we were dealing with COVID, all hell was breaking loose. And we had Kemp Abrams race, and then we had 2 U.S. Senate races, which is very unusual because of the death of the retirement and then death of Johnny Isakson. We had Kelly Loeffler, appointed by Governor Kemp, running against John Ossoff. But before Ossoff got to the general, he had to beat Columbus Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. And so I became very interested in the Ossoff-Tomlinson race because I'd covered Teresa's mayorship for 8 years. I'd covered her at Midtown Inc. before that. I was interested. They had my attention from the get-go. Ossoff became interested in doing interviews with me at WRBL because he wanted people in Columbus to see what the other option was. He was playing a game. And so I did a lot of interviews with Ossoff. I mean, to the point now, I can't call Skip Mayor Henderson. I have trouble calling John Senator Ossoff. I call him John because when I knew him, he was John when he walked in the room. Hey, John, how are you doing? So you build relationships with these people. And where I'm kind of going with this is you also had a second Senate race. You had the one that was supposed to be run, which was pitting David Perdue against Ossoff, and then you had Warnock and Loeffler in the other one. Did I get that right? Okay, so you had these two races, and I misspoke. Ossoff wasn't in the Loeffler race. He was in the regular schedule. It was Reverend Warnock, Raphael Warnock from Ebenezer Baptist Church in downtown Atlanta was the one there. So I start just doing interviews and I start working their PR. Most candidates start with a certain level of team around them. It's a game. They have to have a team, right? They have these teams around them. Well, the bigger it gets, the more the team grows, and you build relationships with people in these teams as a reporter to try to be able to tell the stories. So I realized early on we were dealing with 3 major races that had national impact. And I wasn't even thinking about the presidential race and the impact it had here. So we had another one. So all of a sudden, Georgia, this ruby red Republican taken for granted state, and had been for 20 years, is starting to turn this weird shape of purple. It's like all of a sudden, Atlanta is continuing to grow, and it's growing with young, college educated, professionals, urban folks around there that are tending to be a little more liberal than the farmer down in Americus or in that part of the country. So all of a sudden, and there's more young urban professionals moving in than there are farmers in America. So everything's kind of starting to shift. And Stacey Abrams had been working for 8 years, mostly against Kemp when he was the Secretary of State, to expand Georgia's voter rolls, fair fight. She was working day and night to register young people that may not have registered. So the whole thing is changing. It's like, I want to cover this. I want to be a reporter who covers this. And in the middle of that, there's a Georgia public broadcasting show called Political Rewind. Political Rewind is statewide, plays at like 9 and 2 in the day. It also has a podcast. Bill Nighet is the host. Incredibly good show. And I've been a guest on it frequently recently, but I've been getting to do a lot of appearances there. So now some people in other parts of the state that might not know me because I'm Columbus, Chattahoochee Valley, are starting to know sort of who I am, and which has helped me with being able to get candidates to come in and talk to us. And, you know, and my boss, Connor Hackling, who's our news director, and with the support of Joe McGuire, who's our general manager, have sort of allowed me to run with the political stuff. And I'm doing a lot more of it. And because I think it's important that there are people, reporters, playing the game. It's a game. I'm telling you, it's a game. That are playing the game that are from outside of Atlanta. And I had the highest compliment I've ever had from another reporter who just basically said, "You know what you are now?" I said, "No, what are you?" And he said, "You're the guy from outside Atlanta." I said, "Okay, I'll take that. I'll put that on my business card. You can market that." And so I have done the Political Rewind where I'm talking about politics. And one of the things that in this game that we're all playing, reporters, candidates, voters, we're all playing the game. In this game that we're playing, we need accurate information, because the commercials, they are what they are. I mean, they are a tremendous source of income for TV and radio stations right now. I mean, it's unbelievable how much these candidates are spending, and the third parties that supposedly have no contact with the candidates, but a lot of these attack ads you see are coming from third party groups. Like there's a group that's supporting Herschel Walker in the current Senate race. It's called 34 letter N22, 34 N22, and they're doing some giveaways in South Georgia and across Georgia for gas and groceries, but they're also putting out attack ads. So they're playing the game. Everybody's playing the game. So I decided toward the end of in the middle of the 2020 cycle, I want to get as much information for the viewers of WRBL as I could. I wanted to be a guy, if you were trying to pay attention to politics and all of a sudden you saw me on the air, or you saw my byline online story, and you saw a political thing, I was like, okay, here's something that's going to be of interest locally. I've got 2 clips that I want to show y'all, and I've got a podcast, and I do a Sunday conversation, which is an on-air thing, on-air segment that's on Sunday mornings from 8:30, about 8:30 most Sunday mornings. It's a 5 to 7 minute conversation. It can be with a politician. It could be, this week I'm talking to the 4-star general who's the chief of staff for the United States Army, General McConville. He was in town 2 days ago. I'm talking to the author of the new Striking Strangler book, and the one I'm going to do next week. So I'm getting really good guests that want to come on and talk about things, but politicians too. And the 2 clips I'm about to show you, the reason I'm going to show you, I want to talk to you about them after I show them to you. I want to talk to you about what you took out of it, so pay attention. The first one's going to be an interview I did with Stacey Abrams, and the second one's going to be an interview I did with Governor Kemp. And they're both about 2-minute clips. They're not very long. But I want you to this will give you a feel of what I do, or what the end product of my work is. So I'm going to let, Chris, want to start with Abrams? I'm going to step back. Hold on.
Also, was the refusal of the Republicans in the state to let them solve their water sewer crisis. I know that in Atlanta we were able to solve some of our challenges because of a new tax policy that the state has refused to allow others to use. We've got to have local governments be able to respond to their local needs. We know there are counties that are agricultural properties that can't do the same property tax base. So let's make sure they have a basket of tools that lets them do more to respond to the people they serve. This matters to me, and I'm more excited about taxes than most people are. Because I know you don't have to raise taxes to do right. And you're going to hear a lot about how I'm not going to raise taxes. I'm the only candidate who has ever stopped a tax increase. I'm the only one who protected 82% of Georgians, just because I refuse to let Republicans use the language of tax and pretend that they've used before. And that's what I want to do as governor. I want to make sure that every county, every city, every community, like Columbus, gets to respond to their needs and do better by their people.
Last tax question on that. Do you think our property tax freeze is good government or bad
I
government?
think it was a poor decision. I understand what was happening with the revision of the Constitution at the time that this was put in place, but it is regressive. It undermines the ability of the city of Columbus, of the Columbus-Muskogee County, to extract opportunities. And to your point, with one of the largest veteran communities in the state, what happens is those veterans have to go somewhere else to buy houses because the housing prices are going up. And when you layer on top the effect of Columbus's tax freeze and the remarkable escalation in affordable housing challenges, we're making it harder and harder for people to make choices to stay here. And I want to make certain that Columbus has the tools it needs to attract and retain the communities and the people it wants.
And then go to
You couldn't
Kemp.
add out this week.
Okay, then.
Basically, guns and
Okay, Governor Kemp, this is a different clip, but I'm showing you the two for a reason. I'll explain that in a minute. But this was a one-on-one interview I had with Governor Kemp during the primary when he was being challenged by David Perdue in the Republican primary.
What skill, other than maybe hitting the nail with a hammer, did you learn as a builder that served you well coming to the
Well, I think probably two things. Number one is just, when you're building, you're a grinder. You don't just do something. You don't do what you're getting with two. You don't just do something one day. I mean, the project, it takes a long time. You just have to work hard every day to get it finished on time. It's just a grind. And that's really how I've been in the governor's office, especially during COVID. It's just good days, bad days, highs, lows. Where I hadn't tried to get too high, too low, I just kept grinding, I kept grinding, I still I'm a loser governor. But also just that feeling of being home on Friday night, barely paid the people working for me that needed that check is much or more than I did. Not being able to pay all the suppliers, sitting there with Marty wondering, we're going to be able to get through this. And you got two choices, and you throw the keys back to the bank and give up, or you get up on Saturday morning and go back and grind again. Hope to sell something or hope to make another dollar to wheels off for another day. I did that. Not just one Friday night. I did it month after month after month. And I've done that more than once. Marnie has too. She's been a small person. So this is person like me. So we know how that feels. That's a bad feeling. And I didn't want Georgians to have that feeling. And that's also I learned during COVID. We got to do two things. Protect lives.
Bad
but
at
also livelihoods.
feel like wolves were chasing these primary will
No, I'm chasing the wolves.
expand on that.
But just look at the record. If you don't have anything to fight with, you don't run. I got plenty to fight with. I'm gonna keep fighting anybody that's out there that, wants to change the way our state operates or not telling the truth. And that's what I'm gonna do. That's what my family's doing. That's what our great Georgia team is doing. We're gonna keep doing that. We got a state that's worth fighting for.
That's it. That's it right there.
I think we'll get toward the end
Let's start with the interview with Leader Abrams. Why do you think I asked her about the Columbus property tax freeze? First of all, anybody in this room know what the property tax freeze is? In Columbus, Georgia, when you buy a house, you can freeze your property tax on the day you purchase that house at whatever it is. And for as long as you own that house, as long as you don't do more than 50% improvement to it, that's gonna, your house is frozen at that value. Say it's $200,000. Say you bought a house in 1995 and I come in and buy a house next door to you, same kind of house, same street. And all of a sudden I paid $450,000 for it and bought it last year. I will be taxed at a $450,000 value on my tax. My next door neighbor, who gets the same garbage truck I get, who gets the same fire truck, the same police car, that person is being taxed at $200,000, paying significant. The difference in what neighbors in this town are paying is in the thousands of dollars. You want to?
I bought a house, public tax record. I mean, it's public. You can see my neighbor pays $27 a year, and I pay $1,900.
That's it. Okay. When first of all, I'm surprised the Republicans have not picked the line out of this podcast where she says she loves to talk taxes. I'm surprised that has not showed up in an ad. And I'm stunned somebody like Bill Becker has not seized on that. But you could write an ad around that one line, couldn't you?
I just cataloged.
He is fixing to be a consultant to the Kemp camp. But why do you think I asked her that question? Anybody? Okay, I have a person who wants to lead the state of Georgia, and I've been interviewing politicians at the higher level for a long time. She was the first one I have ever interviewed that understood our property tax freeze and understood the ramifications of it. And it was like, I'm not going to let this go by. I've got a chance to ask the woman who could be governor of the state of Georgia. And it turned out, after we were talking afterwards, she had been a lawyer in the legislature when they were trying to get rid of it. So she understood it. She was well versed on it. She's smart as they come. And so we had the opportunity to sit there and talk about it. I think that question matters. That's not a question one of the Atlanta reporters would have ever asked her. That's not a question the AJC or Fox 5 would have ever asked her. But it's a question I asked her, and it's a question I know a lot of people in Columbus are interested in. That's one of the reasons I'm happy to be in this game. I've got 35, 40 years of experience, and I'm not afraid to ask questions like that to people like that. At the end of the day, I'm very fortunate, and I don't want this to all be about me, it's going to feel a little uncomfortable, but my dad was a lawyer in Eufaula. His law partner was the lieutenant governor of Alabama, Jerry Beasley, when we moved down there. And I was a 10-year-old kid. I've been around high-level politicians my whole life. They're people like we are. They put their pants on, or their skirt or pants in State's case, they one leg at a time. They're just like us. Now they've got teams around them. They've got great jobs. They got the state of Georgia pays a nice SUV to drive the governor around in. I mean, they've got advantages that none of us have. But at the end of the day, they're people. And people respect people that will ask tough questions and don't sit there and are in awe of them. I mean, when you see reporters that are kind of in awe of some of these folks, it makes you a little nervous, and it makes them nervous, quite frankly. You can see it sometimes when politicians and business leaders are being interviewed. And you ask, people like me are in the game to ask people like her those kinds of questions and get the opportunity. Our podcast, the podcast is the Chuck Williams Show. There's 65 episodes of it. Go look at it. If you got an hour or 45 minutes you want to waste, listen to it. You can just Google the Chuck Williams Show and it'll pop up and you'll see all the ones. It's on the Spotify, Apple, iHeart, as well as on WRBL.com. And I think it's about to go on YouTube, is what I was told yesterday. Let's go to the Kemp question now. Clearly, I had a one-on-one with the governor. We're sitting there. He is in the fight of his life, we thought. We didn't know he was going to beat him by 50. Nobody at the time that interview was done thought that Brian Kemp was fixing to beat David Perdue by 50 points. And I had been trying to get an interview, and they said, we'll give you one, but you got to come to our campaign office. It's literally across from the Truist Field sign. Truist Field, it's across the street in an office park across from Truist Field. Drive up there. I wish it had been during baseball season because I would have worked the game in. But went in there, set up. They said, okay, you got 30 minutes. And I said, we're going to sit down. Said, no, the governor doesn't like to sit down. I said, well, so I got to stand up and talk to the governor for 30 minutes? And at that point, I realized I had to stand up and talk to the governor for 30 minutes. And he was really good. That whole interview went well. But through the course of covering Governor Kemp for the last 6 years, I've always been intrigued by the fact that he's a home builder. Some of y'all may know people, home builders, or know people that are subcontractors, that are masons or sheetrock. The people who build houses and buildings, but particularly the people who build our residential homes, they are wildcatters. They're gamblers. They're betting with or against the economy. These people are Joel worked with home builders in Columbus. How would you, for many, many years in your role before, how would you describe?
They really are a different kind of breed. They're tough. They make things happen. They do take risks. They're fighting the weather, suppliers, labor. I mean, they're like a little micro economy, each one of them by him or herself. So yeah, they got my respect too.
And I knew he was a home builder in Athens, and I knew he had been part of the Georgia Home Builders Association. I know a lot of guys, as Joel does, that are in the Columbus Home Builders Association. I'm actually married to a home builder who happens to be a politician, and that's a whole nother story when you talk about politics and games. But my wife is Kathy Williams. She's on the Muskogee County School Board, and she runs NeighborWorks Columbus, which is a nonprofit affordable housing builder here in Columbus. And but I'd always been fascinated that Governor Kemp was a home builder. So I had an opening toward the end of that interview to say, you know, and I'm not a gotcha reporter. If I ask a gotcha question, a candidate or a politician has really screwed up, because it's not my style. That's not how I do it. I'll ask tough questions, but I'm not asking gotcha questions. So Governor Kemp, I wanted to know about the home builder. So I asked it like, you know, other than beating a nail with a hammer, what did you learn? And it was really interesting, his response about meeting payroll and sweating it out. I mean, Joel's seen these stories 100 times, hundreds of times. But at the end, when he said, you know, to keep the wolves away, I'm sitting there and my mind is clicking and I'm thinking, and when he said keep the wolves away, I said, let him finish, let him finish. And then my next question, do you feel like the wolves are chasing you right now? And it was like I took it and was able to spin it right back into the fight he was in. And did you see him bow up? He got steely-eyed, and I'm chasing the wolves. At that point, I will tell you this. I walked out of that building, and Kevin Roble, our chief photographer, was with me. Walked out of that building, and we set up to do a live shot with Truist Park in the background. And the governor was walking out of the building with his state trooper folks and stuff, and he waved, said, see you, Chuck, and I said, see you, Governor. And I was playing that soundbite in my head. I'm chasing the wolves. And I looked up and I said, holy cow, he's fixing to kill him. I said, this is a politician who has tasted blood. He's, pardon the language, he's pissed off that his own people came after him. And now he is fixing to destroy them. You could see it in that answer. It was evident to me. And, you know, and that was probably 2 months out of the election. You could see it. And that's about the time the tide was turning. The polls began to reflect that Kemp was building momentum. But it was different. I didn't ask a Columbus question. I asked a question the guy sitting on the couch would ask. Hey, you know, you got to feel like they're trying to screw with you here. But I asked it in a different way, and he gave me the opening for it. That's what I do. And that's the cool part of my job. I can ask them things that other people won't. Even their staffs won't ask them. And, you know, and I will say this, I've got great respect for Governor Kemp and for Leader Abrams, just as a journalist, as a person, just dealing with them. And they both, I've interviewed them both 4 years ago, and now I've interviewed them in this cycle. I will tell you right now, the governor and Leader Abrams are both much better candidates than they were 4 years ago. Both of them. He's much better. He's more comfortable. He came out of nowhere. You know, he was Secretary of State, but everybody thought it was going to be Casey Cagle. He came out of nowhere to win the Republican nomination and then to beat Leader Abrams. She has been running for governor for a lot of years. got close, but lost. She went back and she fixed some things. There ain't no doubt about it. She fixed some things in her delivery, in her stance. And then, you know, right now, it's going to be fascinating to watch the two of them debate. They're both better than they were 4 years ago. They both are skilled politicians. And I'm going to ask Bill. Bill has run a campaign. Bill ran John Anker's mayoral campaign earlier this year. How important are debates? Are debates?
When they're done properly, when they're done well, they can give a candidate who has very little awareness and credibility instant recognition and bring him up. I think the debates perhaps helped John Anker during that time, because Skip has 25 years of presence in the public eye. John had 0, so they were on the stage together, and those in that hour, the audience deemed them as equals. And then it was at that point in time a battle of ideas, and that's where they, separate themselves. So if they're done properly, and I will give credit to WRBL, your debates were done very well. They were moderated well. They have rules and regulations. You asked the questions that the community was looking for, and I think you gave the community a chance to make a decision.
I appreciate you saying that. I mean, and it's a game. Games have rules and regulations, and and I'm leading into the debates because I think debates matter, and we're about to have a whole host of them. And Joe McGuire, who's our GM, has just negotiated, along with others, many others, but including Nexstar Inc., which is the parent company of us, a Savannah station, WSAV, and then JBF in Augusta. Those are the 3 Nexstar stations, and we brought in Fox 5 out of Atlanta, and we will have the only Warnock-Walker debate before the general election. Think about that for a second. These 2 candidates are very different. I mean, they're both black men, but after that, there are not many similarities. I mean, they both go in a very different direction. And it'll be in Savannah the night of October 14th, and they will be on the same stage with an audience in Savannah. And I've been getting calls from friends of mine, they're reporters all across the state. How did y'all do this? And Joe and others negotiated this for months. We even had a rejection from Governor Perdue or Senator Perdue in the Republican primary debate. We thought for a while, am I speaking out of turn here if I say this?
I don't know what you're going to say.
Okay.
Sounds like a yes.
But we had a proposal on the table that Governor Kemp had accepted, and Senator Perdue refused to accept it because he wanted to debate in Savannah. I don't know why everybody wants to debate in Savannah, but we had a proposal for a debate here in Columbus between Kemp, Perdue, and it would not have been like some of those. This was going to be a one-on-one between the 2 of them because of polling data that we would be able to use on the invitations. But we were going to do it in the Springer Opera House. It would have been the first political debate ever held in the Springer Opera House, the state theater of Georgia. And I think we got this close to it, and then they had to pull the plug. And so, but that kind of loss built to the win that we just got. I mean, there were a lot of people that tried to get this Warnock and Walker debate. And, I think it's going to give the debate will give voters a chance to see the 2 men side by side. And I think that is very valuable. And, and it's funny because, I vote like y'all do. If you try to figure out how I voted, you'd probably go insane because it's public record. I can go down and pull I can't pull how you voted, but I can pull whether you voted Democrat or Republican primary. That's public record, knowledgeable. I mean, anybody in the state can go figure out, did you vote in the Democrat primary or did you pull a Republican ballot? I mean, and you know, it's obviously in the elections office. I pulled a Republican ballot in the primary. And there were a number of reasons for that, none of which I really want to go into, but I can pull a Democrat or a Republican. I'm very careful that you'd have a tough time figuring out where I'm coming from. Some people think I'm the most liberal guy in town. Other people think I'm the most conservative guy in town. Some people think because my wife goes this way, I must go with. I mean, it's fascinating to watch sort of how all of that plays out. But when I forgot where I was going with this. Where was I going with this? You want to help me? Okay, Warnock Herschel. I'll be 62 Monday. That's what I'm blaming this on. Warnock and Herschel will be must-see TV. There's no question about it. People that are interested in the election process and in the game are going to watch the NFL player and the Baptist preacher. I guarantee you they're going to watch it. But, you know, it's going to be interesting because there's a number of other debates. WRBL did a mayoral debate that Bill was just talking about. We are going to do a Georgia 2nd Congressional District debate with Congressman Sanford Bishop and his challenger, Republican from Thomasville, Chris West, who's a developer attorney from down in South Georgia. And that debate will be the 26th, and it will be, I mean, Bill, you're going to have deja vu. It's going to be almost the same format that we did the mayoral debate with. I mean, it's probably going to look very much like it, I would bet, in both format, you know, stage setup and all that. So I think, and that will give us a chance. And I'm, you know, myself, 2 other of my WRBL colleagues will be panelists, as well as a CSU professor, is what I'm being told, that CSU's representative will be one. And it will be in University Hall on the main campus. And the moderators will be our 2 outstanding anchors, Teresa Whitaker and Phil Tomlinson. And I think Bill could speak to this. Phil and Teresa played it right down the middle during that. I mean, they were really good moderators during that debate, weren't they, Bill? They knew what they were doing, and it showed. And they'll do this in the 2nd Congressional. Why is the 2nd Congressional District debate important? Well, it's going to be close. Who controls the House, the Democrats or the Republicans? There's 14 House seats in the state of Georgia. It's only one that is falling under the that's expected to be close. It's this one. And the 2nd Congressional District, if you don't know, it has large chunk of Columbus, everything but essentially Brookstone, Green Island area. Then it sweeps east, gets the biggest chunk of West Macon and down. Then it goes hard south, goes to the Florida line, comes back to the Alabama line, picks up Albany, picks up Thomasville, picks up Bainbridge, picks up Cuthbert, all those places. So it's a weird district. You have South Columbus and West Macon, and Albany, and then you have the very rural areas like Cuthbert and Bainbridge and those places. So it's going to be fascinating. And the 2 candidates kind of come out of the 2 different pieces of that district. So I think you'll see a contrast there, and I think that debate will matter. And I'm glad that WRBL was able to get it, and I'm glad that we will be able to air it on October the 26th. So, and then a third debate that I have stumbled into is probably the right way to go because I'm from outside Atlanta. The gubernatorial debate that will include the Libertarian as well as Governor Kemp and Leader Abrams will be the Atlanta Press Club, Georgia Public Broadcasting, broadcast on Georgia Public Broadcasting. I think WRBL is planning to live stream it as others are. But that debate will be the 17th, 3 days after the Warnock-Walker debate. And I'm myself, Greg Bluestein, I think another Atlanta TV personality, and then Donna Lowry. Donna is the host of Lawmakers, which is GPB's public affairs program during the General Assembly session. Donna's going to be the moderator. The other three of us are going to be the panelists. So it'll be more chance to ask the two you to start their questions, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about being able to ask questions, because when I got selected, so why am I here? That was the question. Why am I sitting here? They said, because you're going to ask questions that are going to be different than what the Atlanta people are going to ask. And that was why I sort of showed that, because that's what I plan to do. And I'm going to reach out on my social media platforms and ask people to kind of help me with the questions some, because I think y'all have got questions as good that probably are better than many of mine. I want to get to a point now, and I've talked way too much about kind of what I do or why I do it, but it's a game, and I want y'all to ask me questions. I want to, if you are better than that, what do you think I should be asking the candidates in the governor's race, the Senate race, the congressional race? What do y'all think I should be asking these people? I mean, they're going to represent all of us. And somebody's got to start. Who wants to do it? Okay.
I have a question that's more along the lines of your experience of reporting. If you want me to ask a question about politics, I can. But you said you've had decades of experience, and so, as we know about politics,
I'm old.
Oh, right. Politics is all local, events are local, and it definitely showed in your Abrams piece where you took a regional state candidate and you asked a local question. And so if all politics are local, the scope with which we view the way that we are journalists is local. Suddenly you're entering into a place where national media is watching or state media is watching. It's suddenly so much bigger than what it was before. How do you as a journalist, how do you as a producer adjust to all of a sudden you have to find that extra niche in that spot where there's so much focus suddenly?
If a reporter from the New York Times, or a reporter from CBS, or a reporter from CNN or Fox, and all of those have been in this market as recently as the Republican congressional runoff between Jeremy Hunt and Chris West, when they come in here, I'm glad to have them. I'll stick my hand out and say, welcome to Columbus, hope you enjoy your time. Go eat at Chester's, it's really good. I'll say, go eat downtown at Country's. I will give them restaurant selections, and I'll talk to them and pick their brain. But I also know they know more about the bigger picture. They know what the forest looks like. They can see the forest. They come from places that are paid to look at the forest. I'm an ant, man. I'm down on the ground in the middle of the trees. And I'm talking to people that I've been talking to for 20 and 30 years. People that they may not necessarily know. And sometimes I'll turn them on to some of those people. Or they'll be turned on by our reporting or some of the Ledger's reporting about some of those people. But my job is to keep it local. I'm not as concerned about what I know they're going to cover well as I am about the things that matter locally. And I'll give you an example. Senator Ossoff he wasn't Senator Ossoff at the time, but he had just destroyed Senator Perdue in a debate. And he had a viral piece in that debate about stock trades and other stuff that in one day got millions and millions of views. I was asking about him. I was asking him about it across the street in a conference room, one-on-one interview at the Marriott. He was doing a car rally at the Civic Center that night. Okay, between the time I had talked to him and we got to the Civic Center, they were debating again in 3 or 4 days, I think. And between the time I asked about the clip and all that, we got to the Civic Center. The Atlanta media was breaking a story that Senator Perdue was pulling out the next debate. He wasn't going. Sorry, I have another commitment. I will not be there. and he had just gotten, so literally I was able to get to the SUV with him still sitting in the SUV waiting to get on the stage and say, have you seen it? We just saw it. And I was able to get the first response from him about his competitor pulling out of a debate. And, so that's where you do pay attention to what the big guys are doing. But you also are lucky enough to be in the right spot. And when he got through with that little debate, I was literally leaving. And I looked up, and there were these lights, TV lights in front of the Civic Center. And I'm like, what is that? He was doing a live remote interview with CNN and Aaron Burnett from the Columbus Civic Center. And I got home in time to watch it. I just started laughing. I mean, that's how local and it all comes together. Any other questions? We're getting toward the end of this. I just got the director's 5-minute hook.
You said the second district is, it's really close. Does WRBL do any polling surveys to kind of follow the trend? And a kind of a follow-up to that, does WRBL also look at any kind of demographic shifts in the area, in the Columbus area, that might be affecting the closeness of the race?
The demographic stuff sort of comes across in some of our reporting. We probably don't do as good a job of that as we should, or I don't. I'll say I don't do as good a job of that as I should. The polling question, I'm going to shift to Joe, because Nexstar, our corporate parent, does poll, and they were the first poll that really picked up the width in the Kemp-Purdue race.
Yeah, so we work with Emerson College does our polling. We have 200 TV stations across the country. We're the largest broadcast group in the country. So all of our polling is done with Emerson College. I'm going to not answer your question because I can't, but we will be deploying a poll October 5th through the 8th about a variety of races and issues. So I'll just leave it at that if you don't mind. And that poll will be published on October the 11th.
Just before the debate.
Correct.
So, and that's one of the different, on the newspaper side, you kind of covered it, you chased the story. On the TV side, and this has been a real blessing and a curse sometimes too, I get to see the debates, trying to get the debates, the production value that goes into the debates. But I also get to see polling, a little more polling, a little different way of playing the game. And it's, and I'll spin it back and kind of close it here. It's a game. I'm telling you, it is a game. And it is, to me, one of the most interesting games played. I love football. College basketball is probably my favorite sport. But I love the Braves, love baseball. But this game has the same thing. It's got larger than life characters. I mean, could you invent Brian Kemp or Stacey Abrams? Could you invent Herschel Walker as a political candidate? Could you invent Reverend Warnock coming out of Dr. King's pulpit to essentially take the step into the political realm that Dr. King never was able to take? Could you invent any of these storylines? You couldn't. I mean, it's just, it's a game. It's a really, really high stakes game that impacts every single one of our lives. And you can play the game. All you gotta do is vote. I mean, think about it. That's all you gotta do. You can get in the game too. All you gotta do is vote. Anything else? I know I rambled some.
So, thanks first, we'll wrap up real quick. Again, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you being here. I do want to say, if you enjoyed this, and I hope you did, I really enjoyed it, found out some interesting things, tell other students, tell other people that might be interested. We're going to be doing more of these, and I think it's important as students to hear from people that are doing this every day, because they can give you that real insight that's so valuable. Beyond that, again, I just want to thank Joe and Chuck. I want to shout out Mr. Greg Hutchinson hanging out in the back of the room. He is our communicator extraordinaire. He's running things over on main campus, and I am so humbled that he was able to join us and stay the whole time, so thank you.
And he has played the game too.
We all do. Also to my colleagues, Dr. Rao, thank you so much for being here. Ms. Boba, advisory board, come on, gotta have our advisory board members here, so thank y'all so much for making this possible. This was awesome, we had a really good turnout. I want every seat filled the next time if at all possible, so if y'all can help us do that, I would really appreciate it. Our next meeting is gonna be right here next Thursday, 12:15. We're gonna have the news director from Channel 3, which I think is gonna be really interesting. You can ask him a lot of those really nerdy questions about what a news director does, and I think that's gonna be a lot of fun. So thank you all so much, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.